see it. I wish you could stand up here and look at everybody. It's really nice. Everybody looks like they're where they ought to be, you know? This looks like home. In that line, let me just remind you that Diane Jocelyn sells homes. She could... prices are good right now, right, Diane? Some of your homes, actually, some of the homes you lived in are for sale again right now. You can just go right back to the way things were. We'd love to have you. Thank you for coming. I'm watching the time, so you don't have to. We'll do this not quickly, but we'll do this well. Churches have changed over the years. It used to be, back in the day when people didn't move around very much, churches were like dams. Churches were like dams. You'd gather up your people and you'd keep them there, and they were there for 50 years. If people were in your church, you would grow up with them, you would live with them, you'd work with them, you'd see them all the time, you would be with them constantly until you said goodbye to them in eternity, and people were dammed up together. You had a church that just looked the same year after year after year after year after year. That's what churches used to be. They used to be dams. Churches these days, though, now are more like rivers. Churches these days are like rivers, and people kind of flow through them as they move along, and people come and people go, and people show up, and then you get to be with them for just a little bit of time, and then they wander off somewhere else, and you wish you sent them on, you hope you sent them on better than they showed up. John Smith last night, made reference to the fact that I had counted one time how many people had been through our river here in Estevan in my time here. Over the years, I've kept the directories, the church directories. I've kept them in a stack in one of my file cabinets. And so I pulled them out one day and I started counting the names of the people who had flowed through Estevan during my time. And I counted just the people who were really, really involved, not just fringe people who happened to be here once or twice, but I mean people who were really involved in the life of our congregation over 30 years. And a conservative estimate would be 500 people. More accurately, likely around 600 people have been through here in 30 years. When people ask me how big is the congregation, I say, oh, we're around 100, but about half of them live in Calgary now, right? It used to be Calgary. Half our congregation was in Calgary. Actually, now it's mostly Regina, so I'm waiting for Regina to send us some supplies back the other direction at some point. But people come and people go, and it's more like a river, and you stand on the river and you try and minister to the people who go by while they go by. And can I tell you something about the river? It's discouraging. It's really discouraging sometimes. Because you stand on the side of the river and you see people float into your life and you say, oh, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here. I love you so much. This is going to be so much fun. We get to do church and live together and be together, and this is going to be so great. And then they float away. And you're left standing on the river bank watching them go. I don't say that to make you feel guilty if you've lived here and moved on. I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty. I'm just saying that to say I miss you a lot. I really miss you a lot. I look around this room and I really do wish I could sell you all a house and keep you here. And it's hard to stand on the edge of the river and watch this happen because you make plans. And you pour your life into somebody. And you say, I'm going to, look at this person, look at this couple. They're going to be such good elders. They're going to be such good deacons, such good teachers, such good helpers. We're set for the next 25 years as these people serve together. And then they come in one day and say, oh, we're moving. We're in the river and we're going away. And that gets discouraging sometimes because you wish they wouldn't, but they do. So as I've stood on the side of the river watching people come and go, I've had to come up with some answers to some questions. I've had to decide a few things that have kept me standing on the river as everyone's gone in and out and come and gone and keep going. And I've answered some questions that maybe you've asked yourself. If you haven't asked these questions yourself, I'm going to give you the question and give you the answer just so you feel better about your time in Estevan as you flowed through our river. I want to answer a few questions for you. Number one, I want to answer the question, did you do anything while you were here? Was your time here useful? Did you do anything good? Did you take advantage of your opportunities? I want to assure you, if you're ever sitting here, if this weekend has made you wonder if you did anything good while you were here, I want to assure you that the good you did was not wasted. The good you did was not wasted. Just because you can't see the measurement of the good you've done, just because you may not have seen the results, just because you may not know exactly how your good affected someone, I want you to know that the good you did while you were here was good. And I want to thank you for it. Somebody saw it, somebody noticed it, it affected someone. You did something good. How do I know that? Because I saw it. At least I saw it. I want to tell you 3 quick stories, or at least some stories about some individuals really quickly. Janice Hirsch started this off last night. She spoke about Ann Johnson. Ann Johnson was here when I arrived. Ann Johnson was really important to me when I got here. When I was 21 years old, I'd sit in that office in the back corner at least once a week. Ann Johnson would call me and say, "What are you doing for lunch?" And I'd say, "I have no idea." And she'd say, "Well, you better come over so you don't starve to death." And I'd go over to Ann Johnson's place, whether it was at Trinity Towers or over here at Midtown Manor, and she'd sit me down with this really simple lunch, and she'd pour coffee that she'd been drinking for like 8 weeks. And she was a good Norwegian. She would never throw it out. She just kept adding to it. And you'd eat your meal and you'd chew your coffee. And she'd tell me about the church. And she'd tell me about Norman Hoffman, who used to jump on a train out in Macun and ride the train in on Sunday morning and preach in that little building and then ride the train back to Macun again. And she loved Norman Hoffman. And she'd tell me stories about how things were here and how they used to be really big and then they got to be really small and then they were really big again. And she told me the stories and she loved me and she looked after me. And if Ann Johnson were to walk through that door right now, I would say to her, "Ann, thank you so much for all the times you had me over for lunch." And she'd probably say, "I don't remember that very well. But I remember it. Because she did something good." I want to tell you a story, not all about all these old guys, but I'll tell you a story about the guy second from the right, Carl Johnson. When I arrived here 21 years old, the leadership here decided they better put somebody with me just in case. Just in case I was too dumb to keep it going or did something stupid, so they were going to put somebody with me to watch me in the office, and they put Carl Johnson with me. And when I heard that, I was scared to death. I'd had a run-in or two with Carl as a kid because he was related to my grandmother, and one time he and Emma had come to my grandmother's house. My brother and I were playing cards at the time, playing rummy. We were told quite clearly that likely wasn't what we ought to be doing. For years we made fun of Carl and Emma because we didn't know who they were, but they tore a strip off us. And I was scared to death of Carl Johnson when I came here. So I sat in my office and Carl sat in his office, and you know what happened? I loved Carl. He was so nice. He was so kind. He was so good. He was so much fun. He told jokes, and he encouraged me, and he patted me on the back, and every Monday morning he called me up and said, "You want to go golfing?" And I'd go golfing out in Lampman with Carl Johnson. And it was great. We'd ride out there and we'd talk church, and once in a while we'd take somebody else with us, but most of the time it was just him and I. And we'd go out there and we'd play golf, and Carl was a terrible golfer. He'd swing like this, doink, and the ball would roll about 100 yards, and he'd say, "I could have kicked it farther than that." But he took me golfing, and he sat right there, and he encouraged me every single Sunday. And if Carl were here today, he might say, "Well, yeah, we did go golfing quite a bit, I remember that." But he wouldn't remember all the times he took me to Marguerite Brooks's place and we fixed something for her, just because that's who Carl was. And he showed me how to be kind, and he showed me how to be nice, he showed me how to believe in God and still be fun, and he showed me something. Carl showed me something. He wouldn't remember it, but the good he did was not wasted. Let me tell you one more story. When I was a kid, Emerson and Marion Good, preached in Moose Jaw. Emerson was the preacher there. I remember being in the pew watching Emerson. I can see him up there right now in my mind's eye. 1986, I decide I'm going to be going to Bible college. Emerson comes to a funeral in Moose Jaw. He and I are going down to the funeral lunch afterwards. And we're going down the back stairs of the church building in Moose Jaw, and he says to me, I hear you want to be a preacher. I say, yeah, I'm going to Western next year to Bible college. How are you going to pay for that, he says. I said, I have no idea. I said, I'll get student loans, I'll work summer jobs, whatever. Emerson says to me on that back stairwell, I want to help you go to school. Okay, thanks, that'd be great. He's all encouraged about that. I'm wanting to go to be a preacher. 6 months later, Emerson gets sick. 6 months later, Emerson passes away. April of 87, I believe it is. April of 87 is the first time I'm ever in this church building. First time I've ever been to Estevan is April of 87 to Emerson's funeral. I sat right over there where Kathy Elford is sitting right now. We'd driven around Estevan a little because we got here a little bit early, and so we'd driven around town a bit, and then we got here early enough that I got to sit in here. And I remember saying to my mom, you can ask her, she's here, I said to my mom, wouldn't it be neat if someday when I get to preach, it would be in a place like this? So I go to Western that fall, and one day I get a phone call, or I get called from the office. I have to go down and talk to the administration about something. I go down, and I believe it was Elaine Vance says to me, there's a letter here for you. I open the letter. It's from Marion Good. The letter essentially says, there was some money donated in Emerson's name at the funeral, and the families decided to take all the money that was donated at his funeral and give it to you so you can go to school. Emerson didn't see how he helped me, but Emerson helped me go to school. Some of you know the rest of that story too. When I finally did end up coming to Estevan for the summer, do you know where I lived? Where did I live for the first 8 months? At Marion's. And if Emerson were here today, I'd say thank you so much. That was a terrible thing that happened, but you helped me. You inspired me. You helped me. And he who doesn't know it, maybe he does. I believe he does. But he helped me. And as I look around this room, I could go around every single pew, every single person. I could tell you how you've helped me. The good things you have done here have not been wasted. You may not know them. You may not be able to quantify them, but they have not been wasted. As I've stood at that river and wondered if I'm doing anything good, one of the best scriptures of all, one of the things that's kept me going is a little short passage in Mark chapter 4, Jesus describing the kingdom of God, talking about what the kingdom of God is like. He says this in a long series of those things. We like the other ones. We preach the one about the mustard seed, and we preach other ones. This is the one I love. I love this description. Mark chapter 4, verse 26 says this. He also said, Jesus also said, this is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground, night and day. Whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, though he does not know how. All by itself. The soil produces grain. First the stalk, then the head, then the full kernel in the head. And as soon as the grain is ripe, he puts a sickle to it because the harvest has come. Part I love the very best is he doesn't know how it grows. He doesn't make it grow. The farmer can't do anything but spread the seed around. And then whether he sleeps or wakes, that seed, those good things, that stuff you've done starts to percolate. It starts to do something. It starts to grow. And I want to assure you that whatever good you've done here was not wasted. Did you teach a Bible class? Did you teach Sunday school? Did you clean this building? Did you help somebody? Did you listen to someone? Did you preach? Did you do vacation Bible school? Did you work in the kitchen? Did you hug somebody in the foyer? Any good thing you've done, thank you for the good thing you've done, because you've made this place a better place. Amen. And that good is not wasted. When I was a kid, we were told we needed to memorize 1 Corinthians 15:58. I memorized it in the old King James, which says this: "Therefore, my beloved brothers, because of every good thing that Christ has done for us, therefore, my beloved brothers, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, doing as much as you can, anywhere you can." Why? Because you know that your labor is what? Not in vain in the Lord. It's never wasted. It's never thrown away. It's never bad. It's never useless. It's always good. It's always productive. It's always worth doing. Whatever you've done, thank you, because you've made this place better. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, well, okay, I can kind of see what you're saying. Teaching Sunday school is a good thing to do, and leading singing was a good thing to do, and I helped out a little bit. That was really good, but you're kind of talking about some ordinary sort of stuff here. I didn't do anything spectacular. I didn't do anything wonderful. I didn't do anything very showy. We always kind of like showy things, right? I didn't do much of that. Can I tell you a second thing I've learned while standing on this side of this river as I've watched things go on for 30 years? Here's the second thing I've understood, and I hope you understand too, that the church lives in the ordinary. The church lives in the ordinary. The ordinary stuff is beautiful, and that's where our life is. There are two really beautiful descriptions of the early church, and they're found in the book of Acts. At the end of Acts chapter 2 and the end of Acts chapter 4. And you probably know these passages very, very well, but let me just read them to you quickly as Luke's describing what's going on in the early church. He says this, chapter 2:42 says this: "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer." That stuff is pretty common stuff. Kind of goes on every Sunday, everywhere, all the time, right? "Everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and miraculous signs were being done by the apostles." They saw some amazing things. I hope you've seen some amazing things in church. I hope you've seen some lives turned around. I hope you've seen some people regain their hope. I hope you've seen some people live a faithful life and go to heaven. I think you've seen some amazing things. But most of the time it's been in the ordinary. All the believers were together and had everything in common. Selling their possessions and their goods, they gave to anyone as they had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those being saved. How was God adding to it? He was adding to it in the ordinary. As they fellowshiped, as they ate together, as they went around together, as they looked after each other, God added to them because people liked it. People were attracted to a group of people who did ordinary things well. End of chapter 4 says this: "All the believers were one in heart and mind. No one claimed that any of his possessions were his own, but they shared what they had. With great power the apostles continued to testify to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and much grace was on them all. There were no needy persons among them. From time to time, those who owned lands or houses sold them and brought the money of the sales and put it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to everyone as he had need. Joseph, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement, sold a field he owned, and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet." Those descriptions of the early church don't describe really spectacular things. Even in the book of Acts, when they talk about the healings and the things that were going on, those were the exceptions. Most of their life was just pretty ordinary. Most of their life was just getting together and looking after each other and eating together and loving one another, and the things that Steve was talking about earlier. Most of their life was there. We are drawn to the spectacular. We want things to be spectacular. This church is not spectacular. It is ordinary. But that's okay, because ordinary is where we live. Ordinary is what makes us who we are. This is where we grow. I haven't done this yet. I'm going to put my family on the spot for half a second. I haven't talked to them about this for 1 second, but if you're not the preacher's family getting put on the spot once in a while, what good is it, right? I haven't mentioned this to them, but they're going to answer a question right now. All three of you on the count of 3, what was our best vacation ever? 1, 2, 3. Oregon. What's the best vacation ever? Oregon. Back in about 2010, Sarah kind of decided we're going to Oregon. We're going to the ocean. The girls had never seen the ocean. We didn't have any money. We had a crummy old van. We decided we're going to Oregon. And we threw everybody in that crummy old van with 300,000 kilometers on it. And we went to Oregon. It was the best trip of our lives. We loved it. It was so much fun. When we got there, it was pouring rain, just as hard as it could pour. And we had a hotel right on the ocean front. And so we loaded our stuff in the room, and the girls said, can we go see the ocean? And it's pouring rain and half dark, and we ran down to the ocean. We've got a picture in our albums. Our hair is just soaked right down. Well, mine not, because it didn't really matter. I don't have much hair. But we're just soaked and smiling because we're at the ocean. It's the best trip ever. 10 days of just running around and seeing stuff and collecting shells and going to aquariums, all kinds of junk we'd never done much before, right? It was glorious. It is the best, by far, vacation we've ever had. But guess what? Those 10 days didn't make us a family. Those 10 days didn't make us a family. Oregon has nothing to do with my family. We're a family not because of Oregon. We're a family because of what happened on October 26, 1987. Well, we weren't even a family then. Let's go 2007. 87 probably did something too, but... Some boring Tuesday afternoon is what makes us a family. Some evening when we're eating a meal together, that makes us a family. Giving each other hugs at night and saying, I love you, that makes us a family, not Oregon. I hope you get to do Oregon. I hope you get to do spectacular things. If this church can do something spectacular, let's go do it. But we're going to grow and be who we are because of Tuesday night. We live in the ordinary. We live in that stuff where we just look after each other, where we care about one another. That ordinary stuff is the extraordinary stuff. In Acts chapter 9, we're told a story about a lady that we remember for a different reason than they remember her. Acts chapter 9, verse 32, or verse 36 says, in Joppa there was a disciple named Tabitha, which translated as Dorcas. She was always doing good and helping the poor. About that time she became sick and died, and her body was washed and placed in an upstairs room. Lydda was near Joppa, so when the disciples heard that Peter was in Lydda, they sent 2 men to get him and urged him, please come at once. Peter went with them, and when he arrived, he was taken to an upstairs room. All the widows stood around him, crying and showing him the robes and other clothing that Dorcas made while she was still with them. The rest of the story goes on to say that Peter takes this lady, this wonderful lady who has passed away, he raises her up and gives her back to them. And we know the story of Tabitha or Dorcas because Peter raised her. We know the story because Peter raised her, but those people in Joppa knew her because she loved them. She looked after them. She cared for them. She made them robes. She did things for them. They remembered her because she loved them in ordinary, everyday ways. My favorite memories of you guys are not the spectacular things. My favorite memories are just Sunday mornings hanging out, having potlucks together. Our life is built on the fact that we sing and we eat, and we worship and we eat, and we do VBS and we eat. We do potlucks well. I miss you when you're not at the potluck, because that's our ordinary thing, but that's where we live, and that's the joyful part of the church. So I want to tell you that if you didn't do anything spectacular here, that's okay. Do the ordinary thing well, because the ordinary thing builds the church. One last question that people ask me all the time, and I know my time's going, so let me give you this. One last thing people ask me about Estevan all the time: what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? You're standing on the river, and the river's getting a little lighter right now. It used to be kind of overflowing when some of you were around. It was overflowing, and now it's pretty light, and it's getting smaller. What's going to happen next? Do you know what I answer? You know what I say? I say, I have no idea. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I do know this. Here's an answer you need to know. If you forget anything else, don't forget this, that nothing is out of control. That you are a member of the Lord's kingdom, and the Lord's kingdom is never in trouble. So you're never in trouble. I don't know what's going to happen here, but I think I know that if you pulled Thomas Orr up here from 1919 and said, look at this, he'd be pretty shocked because he probably didn't dream this. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I know this, God's going to look after us. I don't know who's going to come, but I know this, something's going to happen. I know some really good people have moved along and they're doing really good things in other places, but there's still 10,000 people in this town. Somebody here still needs to know they're loved by God. Somebody here still needs a family. Somebody here still needs redemption. Somebody here needs salvation. Somebody here wants to go to heaven. We can find them. I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen. I'm absolutely convinced. And I'm not convinced of it because we're so good. I'm convinced of it because of one other reason, something that I really love. And if you forget everything else, here's the thing to remember. Jesus said, I will build my church. I don't have a church to build. I don't have a church to build. Jesus does. Jesus will build his church, and he'll build it through us if we let him. But Jesus will build his church. And he said that if you let me build the church, nothing will stand against it. In fact, the rest of that passage says, even the what? The gates of hell will not stand against it if I build it. So one of my favorite stories in the entire Bible comes from the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 28, you may remember there's a guy named Jacob. And Jacob and his brother have been sort of arguing and fighting. There's a little scrap going on about who gets the inheritance, and some bad things have happened. And it turns out that Jacob decides he has to run away from his brother. And so Jacob runs away. And in chapter 28 of Genesis it says this, that Jacob left Beersheba and he set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and he lay down to sleep. And he had a dream in which he saw a staircase resting on earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And there above that staircase, stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you're laying, and your descendants will be like the dust of the earth. And you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and the south, and all the peoples of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go. I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I've done what I promised you. Here's my favorite part. Jacob awoke from his sleep and he thought this, surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know it. I wonder if sometimes you've sat here and wondered, is God still around? Is he still blessing us? Is he still looking after us? How are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to keep the lights on? Who are we going to teach? What's going to happen next? We get wringing our hands and wondering, oh my goodness, are we in big trouble, or what's going to happen next? And maybe God's here even when we don't know it. How about God is here? Even if we don't see it, even if we don't understand it. There have been times when people moved away and I thought, if they move away, it's going to kill us. We're still going. It hurt us, but it hasn't killed us because God had another plan. Something else has worked out. Things are still going. I'm not that smart to keep it going. But God is in this place. And God is with you. Whether you know it or not, whether you can understand it or not, whether you see how it's going to work out or not, God is in this place. And that's good. That's all we need. Because if God is with us, who can stand against us? Says Romans, right? God is in this place.
Tim, I heard angels singing this morning.
God is in this place. I'm absolutely convinced, because if God's people are here, God is with us. So maybe you don't know what's going to happen next, but I know for sure it's going to be okay because God is in this place. I've been talking about this river, people coming and going. Actually, I'm not trying to make you feel bad for leaving, because here's the thing. Even if you stayed, you're going to leave. Right? That river of time keeps flowing too, and even if you never left Estevan, at some point you're going to leave. At some point that river is going to take us somewhere. It's going to take us to an ending point. And the joyful thing about this is whether you're on the river that's called Estevan, or you're in the river called Regina, or Calgary, or Saskatoon, or Carmen, Manitoba, or wherever you are, that river leads to the same spot. That's the real blessing. When John got to see a little glimpse of heaven, he said this, "After that I looked, and behold, there was a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, and from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb.'" That's his picture. People from all places. I couldn't even count them. There were so many. And we're all gathered around the throne. I'm so thankful you came here this weekend. When we thought about doing a reunion, I had a list in my head, and I thought, I really hope they come, and they come, and they come, and they come. I want to see those people. Wouldn't it be great if they were back again? And most of you came back, and that's so wonderful. I'm so thrilled that you're here. I'm so thrilled we've had this reunion. But as Dale said earlier, because of Christ's death on the cross, because of his forgiveness that he gained us, because of that resurrection we read about when Jeff read that reading, it's a bigger reunion coming. The river flows to the throne. So whether you're on the river of Estevan or wherever you are, keep being faithful, keep hanging on, keep doing the good you do. Don't give up. Everything, whether you know it or not, you're doing something worthwhile because God can use everything because God is with us. Thank you for coming home this weekend. But please, please, please make sure you're here for the next reunion, the big reunion, where our Father will stand around the throne. Look at the multitude he's gathered up, all his children, and say, welcome home. Let's stand as we sing.